She's going to introduce the 100% Foreign project, which is a 3-year project. And actually, as she is a visual artist who uses photography as a kind of tool of, as she writes here, emancipation through which different kinds of citizenship and community can be enacted, I'd say explored and enacted. So that's the position of that. And it is a large-scale project. It was built on 250 interviews and participants. So we're looking at a national project, and we're looking at something over a long time, which also has its different challenges, but rooted also in questions of identity, which we've been talking about public art, but this is going further than public art. It's in the public debate, and it's in a big question in a political context as well. So how does an artistic interpretation of this or intervention in this also can be managed? So thank you, Maja, for joining us, and over to you, I think.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was actually the project that I'm going to talk about is very much a project that we did together with Trevor at Metropolis as a platform and a producing institution for it. So if you have any comments along the way, Trevor, feel free to dig in. I think I'm just going to start by presenting the project, because there's so many aspects of it, but just exactly what was it, what did we do, what did it look like, and then go into more of the why we did it and how we did it a bit later on. So yeah, I did the share screen thing. Do you see my PowerPoint?
No.
Hello?
No.
Do you?
No, we didn't.
No,
no.
Okay.
No. It's coming now. Yes, it's there. It's there. Yes,
yeah.
Fine.
Okay. Except that I can't change the windows of it. Okay, hang on a second. Okay, here it is. Yeah, great. Okay. So anyway, 100% Foreign is let me just remove myself so I can see what I actually wrote. So then, it's a documentary art project with 250 portraits of people who statistically represent the 167,000 people granted asylum in Denmark since 1956 from a bit more than 30 countries. And this was actually the first kind of big scale nationwide mapping of these personal stories, experiences, and also portraits of this group of citizens in Denmark. And the project was done in collaboration with 22 municipalities, and it was exhibited 28 times in cultural institutions, art institutions, inside, outside, and mainly in the public space, actually. But this is just to give an overview of how that all went down. So we started in the city hall in Copenhagen, where with the first 100 portraits, images, and texts, where the people in the project portraits were also present and having these live sessions with the public and the audience, telling their stories, debating the subject. And we had schools coming in where the participants also were doing educational programs for them. Then after this kind of launch in 2016, we went and tried it out in the public space for the first time, as this was supposed to be a public space exhibit. And the first place was at the harbor side in Copenhagen. And then after 2 weeks there, it didn't go overly well, because the exhibition was vandalized, and more than half of it actually ended up in the water, destroyed. And here's a picture of Trevor. I think you were the only person actually jumping into the water and trying to save what was left. So that was, of course, a very critical starting point to what was going to be this touring storyline, new storyline of this topic in Denmark. But it also made it all the more kind of apparent why it was important, and made us just wanting to go on with the last of the other cities. And then doing so, we managed not only to prepare, to rebuild, repair, and show it again, but we had almost no incidents after that, and the cities really came together and engaged in not only showing the exhibition, but actually creating loads of communal activities surrounding this exhibition, the local citizens being in it, 10 people from each city as we went on were part of it as well with this background. And so we had different groups from within the participant base who started doing their own folk meetings, sessions, and we had city walks and different kind of, a lot of different activities. And as I said, in each city, 10 new portraits were added by local citizens. So it was a growing piece in that sense. And at the end, it was all shown at this art center in Jutland, continuing with these sessions by the participants telling stories and so on. And in almost each municipality, the mayors came out and took it in as a story to say that they were very aware that this was of course, politically hot potato, and then very difficult to talk about on a for the people in question to talk about, because it was all running on a national level. But this was then a chance to take it on a more locally based level, where the participants and the city could actually come together and talk about it outside of this kind of crazy national debate realm. So the participants were telling stories along the way with in all the openings, debating the issue, also educating, doing educational programs in all the cities with local schools based on their own experiences and stories. Gymnasiums, we did creative workshops on kind of identity issues and self-representation stuff. I just have to kind of move a bit fast. But then the big why, of course, I guess in 2015 we were working with a group of former refugees then on another project, and they were so tired of seeing the same kind of debates and representations about this issue, where they couldn't really recognize themselves or their stories in this kind of media and institutional landscape who presented the so-called refugee crisis at that time in Denmark. This was also like historically, as well as in 2015, the story was very much told only through these polarized political debates, statistics, and then like for and against rhetoric. So the whole human perspective were almost completely gone, or this kind of interest in the people who actually had this experience and have been living here for a long time, and their kind of take on it, and not only in the media realm, but also in the art world. Actually, the tendency was to present this issue through what as a headline could be called symbolic gestures, and also situations where it's more about like the perspective of the human suffering and the disability that these people are kind of facing. Yeah. Oh, dude. And these are examples of that. I'm not going to go into it, but just show that this is Ai Weiwei exhibiting or transferring this subject to the city of Copenhagen in this kind of manner, and also a local institution doing the same thing, placing the subject here in this way. And in museums and archives, the only stories we have here is of and by Germans after the Second World War who were refugees in Denmark for a short period of time. So there's actually no official public memory going on at all, but a lot of resource politically, economically, and so on this issue. Yeah, so there's a big kind of imbalance in a way, in that sense. And so we thought that in 2015 that we would go about the story using statistics this time to tell the personal stories, and not as a kind of a generalizing layer in this on this subject. And so we thought also that basing the selection of participants invited on facts and not on a pre-selected group with possibly a politically explicit agenda or something, that may open us up to a wider both audience, that the audience would open up to the subject, and that the cities would actually have a platform where they could take it in on a very local level, and talk about it outside of this very intense political climate. And so these are the criteria we used in mapping out the statistics, statistical overview. So the criteria were it was of course nationality, but also year of arrival, year of asylum, gender, and family unification. And this is just an overview of the different backgrounds, nationalities, whatever, that are represented in the project, and how many in terms of countries. So with Iraq, Afghanistan and Syria first, and then down to the smaller countries of Czechoslovakia, Turkey, Armenia, and so on. And then for the text, the portrait text, we had we worked with 16 different writers, poets, journalists, and writers to write the participant stories. And it all started out, the stories started out by them commenting on this on the project's title, actually, that would kind of mimic the essential question of many of the televised debates surrounding Danishness, trying to figure out when are you Danish, when are you foreign, trying to all the time focus on categories, on categorizing identity in that way. So the sum of these answers were of course very telling, because it showed the limitations of this debate format, of course, but also brought to the story a more kind of human response and complexity regarding belonging and migration issues. And then for the visual portraits, I wanted to try and do, and also in terms of this topic of participation, that was always a balance, of course, because I invited them to participate, but with the language that I developed, more or less as much as I could with the participants. A lot of it was informed directly by their responses and critiques, but also, of course, I had to have a strong red line in terms of visual identity going forth in a project that aimed to actually create a new narrative and another alternative narrative to the present one. So using stage photography as a platform for engaging and enacting citizenship was one of the goals, and then mixing local visual storytelling and personal stories to then kind of renegotiate this common national identity of ours, and then presented in a very, as you saw before, seductive, easy to understand postcard exhibition format for people to easily engage with them, with the storyline on the streets of Denmark, basically. The mapping of the landscape was focused on finding these landscapes that would then mirror what we used to understand as our national identity in pictures, and that was often landscapes that were cultural heritage sites, outdoor museums kind of thing, but also places that are more actively redefining this this identity, and boom, yeah. So the whole visual storyline started in Tivoli, which is an amusement park in the center of Copenhagen, and there's various different reasons for that, and it has a long story to it that I'm not going to go too much into, but just to say that it's a place that always kind of represented the Danish and the foreign in terms of architecture and visual language, symbols, colors, and so on. And of course, it's also a big kind of caricature, playground, microtopia, whatever, a place where you can actually also play with these identities. And furthermore, a lot of the participants had this, they actually suggested it as a space in the city where you're more free and you feel a bit more maybe equal. It's also interesting because it's a place where people just think about amusement, but it has a very strong cultural identity of representing the outside world and mirroring that historically through tearing down and building new structures, and then working very intensely with these forms of representation, actually. So so what we did was we went into in this scenographic landscape and invited, of course, the participants to bring the objects that they wanted to tell their story with, family members, the clothes that they wanted to wear, and so on. So they had that invitation, and then they came in and looked at all the different places that could be a background for their story, and they kind of chose with me, of course, where that should be staged. So that was the starting point, and on the left you see like an example of me trying to also translate their personal stories directly visually. Here it's a guy from Bangladesh who's leading the national party here in Denmark, and he's still kind of demonstrating against a system that was very corrupt when he had to flee, and is still very much so. And so he travels around Europe with this group of people who are still demonstrating the same way they used to do. And this is a kind of an absurd staging of that, because he knows that they're probably not going to get anywhere, so they're kind of running around in circles. And so all of these from Tivoli are examples of that, stories about coming here, having a very good job or education, and having to adjust. Yeah. Okay.
You have to push it. Yeah, push on.
Yeah. I'm running.
Okay.
And having to reinvent yourself and start from scratch. This is Selma on the right, who talks about this finding of finding out that she actually had an ethnicity she didn't know she had before, when she, as 12-year-old, was told she couldn't wear black clothes at a funeral back in ex-Yugoslavia, because that was only the Christians doing that. And she was a Muslim now, and that kind of device in ethnic groups later became the reason she had to flee, and then later again became the reason that she took on this Muslim identity in Denmark to, yeah. So anyway, just to say that all of these pictures are about how you navigate these different identities, what you take with you and what you leave and what you hold on to, and family conflicts arising from this issue, so on. To finish off then, we went on in the rest of Denmark doing the same thing, finding like almost a micro Tivoli. This is the example of Sønderborg, which is a place where they told us we couldn't take pictures in front of this mill that you see in the background, because it's a very clear symbol of Danish nationality. It was a battleground for Denmark and Germany back in the day. So in every landscape we had to figure out how to not be too confrontational, and bring a lightness and a humor into it, so that every landscape, of course, could be a part in this storyline. But they were then really afraid that people would have a strong reactions in the city to seeing people in front of, or former refugees in front of these different symbols. So it was really an experiment in doing it a bit with humor. This is trying to comment on guys being very athletic in certain of these communities, but then the contrast with the small cups and in this very nice Danish landscape. Another situation from Åben Rå, where we kind of interfered in a local strange festival activity, which is a ring riders festival. And this was an area that was really known to not be pro-immigration at all. But then we kind of managed to get them engaged in backing the portraits and the storyline, because we talked about the cultural meeting. This is one of the places that actually have a strong, active culture going on in Denmark in that sense. So it ended up being creating a different kind of small community while it lasted, which was really nice. And the last of the examples I'm just going to run through, but they are commenting on the Danish art history, on national identity, and then placing these citizens within those landscapes, basically. So commenting on belonging and longing, and trying to fit into the landscapes and being in sync with them or being out of sync with them, commenting on like how the ghetto situation is managed in a lot of places where they have these outdoor fitness things that then they are supposed to be active outside kind of thing. I think I'm running out of time, right, Trevor?
Well, just run them through. That's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
This is in the Viking Ship Museum in Denmark, where it's a place that we kind of understand ourselves and as these like proud Vikings, which is also like almost for a lot of scientists almost fake story, because so much of that identity that we've been building on for so long here in Denmark and Scandinavia is made up and not true, and actually started when the whole nationalistic wave started in the middle of the 19th century. So different stories about how we are constructing our stories of identity and nationality, and how we are very actively curating what is and what is not a part of that. Yeah, and then of course just working visually with layers of landscapes and memory, and how you translate a mental landscape from one place to another, and so on. So many layers of this, but anyway, yeah, a very short introduction to it. And now we are continuing to work. There's a new organization that started with a lot of the participants moving forth in this educational programming that we've been doing all along, and taking charge now of doing that, continuing to do that in the schools in Denmark, based on these stories and images, because it's very easy to understand kind of language that we created within this approach. Yeah, I think that's all that I
okay, that's fine. That's really good. Yeah. No, it's a strong point to end. So thank you very much for that.